I once heard that everyone is an expert in something, even if it is just their own experiences. And there's something to be learned when someone tells their story. Even ordinary people can be hiding something extraordinary. You just have to listen. Who knows how much there is to learn, hiding in plain sight, right in front of you. I've decided to embark on a journey to find remarkable things in seemingly unremarkable places. The only thing I can guarantee is that whatever it is we find, it will be surprising. This is Subject, and I'm your host, Jared. Let's do this. Once upon a time, there was a deafening roar that awakened people like never before. Some people covered their ears, but some wanted more. Some demanded we turn up the volume. This is the pedagogy of the pissed, a do-it-yourself ethic fueled by anger and passion. Youth screaming, destroy the oppressive institutions, endure any pain if it gets you noticed. This is punk, and punk is loud. Punk is vibrant, jumping, screaming, punching, kicking, fighting, nihilism, hedonism, anarchy, and it's also iPhone cases, Facebook groups, bumper stickers on station wagons. You see, punk as a subculture, it emerged way back in the mid-1970s, somewhere in the United Kingdom. It gained traction in the United States sometime in the early 1990s. What this means is, some punks are grown-ups now. Some punks have families, bank accounts, retirement plans, a mortgage even. Today, some punks have a Ramones bumper sticker on their Subaru, and they share pictures of it on their favorite Facebook groups for their friends to like and comment on. I mean, Mick Jones is 67 years old. Richard Hell is 72. Also, side note, Hell had a non-speaking cameo role as Madonna's murdered boyfriend in everyone's favorite 1985 film, Desperately Seeking Susan. And my point in saying all this is that punks are among us. They can be anyone. They can be friends, they can be enemies, they can be teachers, doctors, lawyers. They can also be almost lawyers. This is the story about a punk and a husband, a father, and a good friend. This punk went to law school. This punk interned at a law office and even wore a fancy tie. But this punk also dropped out willingly. So let me introduce you to my friend Paul Keene. But of course, first things first, before Paul can talk about his story, he has to talk about punk.
When I was 19, I was inspired by Adam and His Package. Do you know that band?
No. Sounds enticing, I guess. I don't know.
So it's a super nerdy guy from Philadelphia who got a synthesizer, a drum machine, his guitar, and just wrote songs on his own. Before I heard it, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. You're your own punk rock band. What's more punk rock? You know, at the time that I heard it, and I was like, that's not really punk rock, because he does kind of like electronic music-y things with it. And like now I'm sort of like, no, that's pretty punk rock. I'd say the thing I recorded that I'm most proud of, I decided I was going to be my own band like Adam and His Package was. So I called it Gob Hoblin. I took a 4-track recorder and I just wrote simple 4-chord punk on a guitar, screamed it into a microphone, screamed the lyrics into a microphone, recorded it on a bass, and then got a keyboard and just kind of tapped out the drum parts. And I still have the tape. I think someone sent me, no, I found a tape a while ago, but someone digitized it. And so it's somewhere out there on the internet. That's one of those lightning in a bottle moments where I was just home from my freshman year of college over spring break. And I just recorded all that and I just gave it to friends and they thought it was great. So
see, that's punk rock though. Is just doing it. In my mind, this is punk rock and I think punk is everything to everyone. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But for me, I see it as punk is that thing that if you're not that guy who is studious about music, you don't necessarily know how to read sheet music even. You know, you just have a guitar in your hand and you want to make noise. There's nothing studious about punk. There's nothing that's serious. You didn't read any punk rock lyrics in a book, especially not like some textbook or something. Basically, you just had a fit of inspiration, a 4-track recorder, and you just went for it. It's rough, it's abrasive, it's not polished, it's not produced. It's representative of a moment in its raw form. And to me, that's punk.
For me, when I think about punk rock, one of the things that it was born out of, they were sick of arena rock. They were sick of being told they were too ugly to be musicians, when that should have nothing to do with being a musician. They were sick of being told they weren't talented enough to be musicians when they had something of value to say other than, you know, reheating whatever the latest 70s pop rock was. So it comes from this place of having something honest to say. That blew a bigger hole in rock and roll than a lot of other bands. You know, it's like I enjoy prog rock now, but I don't think prog rock had nearly the impact on society that punk rock did. Wanting to carry that ethos, wanting to say, I want to ask the questions nobody wants me to ask. I want to do what I want to do, even if that annoys you. I want to be who I want to be, even if you don't think that's who I should be. I feel like I'm that more than I ever was in punk rock. You know, you talked about that uniform. I wore that uniform trying to fit in. I still wear those kind of clothes sometimes, but I'm never doing it trying to fit in. I'm doing it because that's what I want to do. So there's a Facebook group, it's called Colorado Punk Rock Army. They sell t-shirts, and I have one, and the shirt I have, it's the Colorado state flag, and it's got the sort of the red C with the yellow circle in the middle. But then Colorado Punk Rock Army put an anarchy symbol in the middle. I was like, so wait a minute. You're using the symbol for state government and an anarchy symbol all at once. Although the other thing is, now that I think about it, it's like, yeah, but the anarchy symbol is over the state symbol. So maybe that's the deal. I remember I saw somewhere somebody had like an anarchy symbol on a coffee mug, which is just like, that's so, like, to me, it's also a weird part of the no rules in punk rock. It's sort of like, oh, you're saying I have to be an anarchist this way? All right, I'm going to put on a coffee mug. What are you going to do about that? Nothing, because you can't. I mean, you're talking to a guy who drives a Subaru Forester with a Subhuman sticker on the back. Me and a lot of my punk rock friends, we are either at or slightly above 40 at this point. We now say we've graduated to the back of the pit because it's like we love the songs. We want to be there for the shows. We're still wearing our jackets with patches all over them. But it's like, a pit? It just sounds exhausting. And I've seen this band 2 times already. I'm just going to hang out at the back. You kids have fun up there.
How do you become a rebel when you're older? I always wondered that. It reaches a certain point where it's like, can I nap? Can I like destroy the system by like just sleeping by like noon?
It actually gets a little easier because if you stay the same, all your friends will be like, what, you don't wear slacks all the time?
What? Why is punk so like deeply connected with a dress code? I've never understood that.
I think it has very much to do with being able to recognize one another. David Cross was talking about how when he was a comedian starting out, being able to quote Monty Python back and forth with somebody else was like a secret handshake. It's sort of a signal. It's like, hey, I'm safe. You can do that stuff around me and it'll be fine. So if you see a guy with a battle vest and you recognize the bands, I know this person at least likes punk rock and they're going to be nicer to me and it's going to be safer than if I go over to all those normal people over there.
Paul saw the way other punks dressed and felt a sense of safety and comfort. These were his people, and they shared a common jargon. And these were the same kind of people whose appearance were specially crafted to induce terror in the heart of any domesticated American, any PTA member. Paul found refuge amongst the misfits from an early age, and when he began studying in college, he still found solace in the fringe. For some of us, music is an indispensable part of who we are. But at some point, a lot of us begin to realize being a rebel won't pay the bills. You might have to condense your pursuit of anarchy to just the weekends. And for the rest of your week, you do your best to blend in.
But I graduated from the University of Georgia in 2005. And I majored in history, but that's only because they didn't have being in a band as a major. And then I hung out in Athens for like another year or two, just trying to see if I could make it as a musician. My favorite thing I played was bass, but then I'd also played some drums in some indie bands too. I'm not a good punk rock drummer, but I'm a good punk rock bassist. So I did punk rock bass, and then I was a drummer in an indie band, sort of a weird goth blues thing. I think I just tried really hard to be a musician, and I think I probably could have made it if I stuck around longer.
Really?
But it kind of got back around to I don't really understand people. Just in general. I remember I was at a show in Athens and the sort of in crowd of musicians all started doing something together. And I realized I couldn't get in on it at all. And also that I didn't want to. So I was like, okay, I need to figure out what else I'm going to do here. And, I kind of stumbled into being a teacher. I didn't really want to, I swore I was never going to do IT because my dad did IT. And I was like, I'm never doing that. I went to apply to be a PE teacher, and it was this bare bones Catholic school. And the principal said, do you think you could also be our tech teacher? I was like, yeah, sure, if you'll pay me. Like, if there's a paycheck involved, do whatever you want for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I ended up liking the IT stuff more. So then that kind of turned into an IT career. And then from there, I worked just sort of another general support, but I didn't like the hours. But I got a job at another big technology company in Denver. But it was really like the skills I had built up, this was kind of beneath that skill set.
Oh, I see. And you just weren't loving it.
So it was sort of a lot of things at once. I translated that lack of loving a logistics job into, oh, I must hate IT work. This would have been like late 20s. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do something with my life, I need to start figuring out what that is now.
What are you doing with your life? It's hard to hear that question without also hearing a sort of implied accusatory tone. Most people get defensive, but that's because it's a hard question to answer. A lot of us spend our whole lives either trying to find that answer or avoid thinking about it. But it's an important question. And Paul finds himself pondering if what he's doing with his life is worth his time. Could I be doing more? Is there something I can be doing with my life that's more important? Is this all there is? A built-in feature of being a human living in this day and age is personal crisis. We all will reach a point, if we haven't already, where we begin to ponder what our entire life is even supposed to be about. What are we supposed to be doing with all of this being alive thing? Some of us ignore it and just go about business as usual. Some of us tear our world apart. We go on a rampage or we wait for a sign. And that is exactly what Paul did. He waited for a sign, which came in the form of a documentary on TV.
I'd never really had a plan that went more than 20 minutes into the future. I was just really bad at planning. I just kind of drifted and saw whatever was in front of me. I was like, I'll go for that. I was engaged to Sarah at the time, and I was really worried that if she wanted standard 1950s scenario, I was like, well, what if she wants to stay home and not work? I don't have enough money to do that. So I felt like, well, I, as a man, have to be ready to support her if that's what she wants to do. So I was like, okay, I need to find a better job that pays me more money. And I was homesick one day and I watched a documentary about taking the California bar, which did not make going to law school or becoming an attorney look glamorous at all. But I was still intrigued. And I took that as kind of a sign. It's like, well, then if it looks awful and you still want to do it, that must be what you want to do. That's what kicked off what ended up being, I want to say, about a 2-year process. A part of that journey started to change me. I was like, well, if I want to do this, I got to do it right. So I started getting organized right away. I found LSATs. I took them and forgot about them. Yeah. I didn't want to do that part. It's really weird now to think about how many people I know who became attorneys and were just as excited as I was and felt like what they were doing along the way, they would grow to love later, but they never did. One of the main reasons I did this is I wanted to make sure I could support Sarah in whatever she wanted to do. In retrospect, I realized I was only thinking about financial support. What I really wish I'd done better is put more time and energy and support into her getting her degree, because she was the first person who tried to talk me out of going to law school. It was basically, are you fucking crazy? And I didn't listen. So I tried to do a better job of listening to her. I think we both kind of realize now that whatever selfless motives I had in trying to go to law school, there was always a touch of selfishness to it. As I started telling people, yeah, I'm gonna take the LSATs, I'm gonna go to law school, which was kind of a conscious choice because I felt like if I kept it to myself, if it died, I wouldn't have to admit defeat or embarrassment to anybody. But I was kind of saying it out loud to, number one, manifest it, but also be like, okay, well, you've kind of inadvertently promised all these people you're going to do it. You have to follow through now. Yeah, which was helpful in a way. I kept meeting people who were trying to discourage me, and I just couldn't be discouraged. I was like, nope, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I think one of the ones that sticks out in my mind the most is there was a guy at my church who tried to talk me out of it. And he used a really good metaphor. He says, lawyers are the garbage men of the world. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, whatever the problem is on the planet, whatever mess has been made by normal people, lawyers are the ones who are going to have to come behind and clean everything up.
What do you do when everyone who knows you is telling you you are making a bad decision? What do you do when you have your heart set on something that everyone thinks you're crazy for wanting? Some argue this is why we have spouses and children and parents and colleagues and friends, because someone has to know us better than we know ourselves. We need them to tell us things. We need them to say, I know you. You are not the kind of man who does this kind of thing. Sometimes we need people in our lives to remind us who we really are before we go completely off the rails and bunker down. The people who care about us are sometimes the only people saving us. All these signs never stopped appearing for Paul, but at this point, they were indicating something different. These signs were of the U-turn variety. They were stop signs. They were red flags. But Paul was determined to do what he set his mind to doing. Because the truth is, we never know for sure about ourselves. When we will see reason, when we will quit, and when we will persist. Only after we've done a thing do we really know what we'll do.
You got to prep for the LSAT. That's going to take probably at least 6 months to a year. You got to spend 3 years in law school. And that is also nonstop. You don't like get summers off. You got to do internships and stuff like that. And then when you're done, it's bar prep time. And that's probably another 6 months to a year process. The bar test in any state is very expensive. Some are notoriously hard. So our plan was we're going to apply to a bunch of law schools all over the country. And wherever we land, we're going to try and settle there.
Is this when you went to Raleigh?
Yeah, that's what I went to Raleigh for. Well, I went to North Carolina Central Law School. Excellent law school, difficult law school. But one of the other things I heard from a lot of attorneys in North Carolina is, we get lawyers from other law schools. They don't know how to be an attorney. North Carolina Central law students come out ready to practice law. But yeah, I had this plan. So I took an LSAT course, which was the first thing that was kind of disciplined of me because I had to find the money to do it. I had to study for it in my downtime. And then I had to go to this class. I think it was like once or twice a week. I did okay with the course. So I did the course. I signed up for the LSAT, which I had to take at DU, University of Denver. And I had this very weird experience that should have been the first red flag that I should not have been an attorney. Where you take the LSAT, you're sort of in this waiting room and everyone's either kind of cramming, trying to stay calm, or shooting their mouth off. And I'll never forget these two guys as long as I live because it so did not matter. They were just kind of going back and forth. It was like, yeah, I think I'm going to take it. And if I don't feel like I did good, I'm going to cancel the score because you could do that. And they were just kind of going back and forth saying stuff like that, just kind of puffing up their chests for each other. The reason I like that story and the reason I say that's my first red flag is because it wasn't so much about the test. They were obviously putting up a front for each other. I don't want to make it sound like everybody who goes to law school is an idiot. Everyone who wants to be an attorney is an asshole. But there's also, I remember when I was at my internship at the North Carolina Department of Justice, one of the attorneys told me a story. Gosh, I wish I was making this up. It's a lawyer who would wear cowboy boots everywhere he went and refer to himself as a hired gun.
Oh. I don't like that at all.
But the reason the lawyer was telling that story is like, don't be that attorney. Don't do it. And so I got a good enough LSAT score. I got into a couple of law schools. There's like one in Boston and North Carolina. Obviously, I chose one in North Carolina. There was a first day that was sort of an orientation where the professors were designed to scare people to not come back.
Okay.
And it worked. There were 2 or 3 people who were in orientation who I never saw again.
Just making it to the first day of a class in a law school is an impressive accomplishment, and Paul did it. But don't let the prestigious surroundings fool you. Paul hadn't lost touch with who he was. The punk was still there. Despite this new environment, Paul couldn't stop himself from indulging in some light-hearted shenanigans.
One thing that's really fun to do is play computer pranks on law students. A lot of law students had Windows laptops. And if they left them unlocked, I'd flip the orientation so that the screen went like this.
Oh, you'd make the screen upside down.
Yeah, upside down and backwards. It's one of those things where they just made me fix it again because they all knew that I knew how to do stuff like that. But it was just kind of funny because they go to the bathroom, I'd flip it, and they'd be like, damn it, Paul, fix it now. My favorite one is I wrote little bash files that would just basically, all they do is they'd open up a Chrome tab. So I went around and I found a bunch of YouTube clips of like sitcom theme songs, like Full House, Different Strokes, Family Matters, stuff like that. I basically put all these bash files into one file. Mm-hmm. And then if someone left their computer unlocked, I'd take the thumb drive over, I'd upload the file, I'd bury it, and then I'd put scheduled tasks on their Windows machine so they'd be working. And all of a sudden, boom, Different Strokes theme song just starts playing while they're trying to work. And that's, a lot of people make fun of the hairbrain, but that's what the hairbrain can do.
While Paul was having fun pranking his colleagues, he was also slowly starting to realize there weren't many other people at that school who were like him. It seems like there were only 3 kinds of people. The A-type personalities, strong and aggressive, the nerdy type who spent all day studying, and then there was Paul, just Paul, the hair-brained prankster, in a league of his very own.
Yeah, there were a lot of type A's, but there are a lot of different types of people. There are actually a lot of sort of really nerdy, wonky types. And what they like to do is sit around and read all the time, which is perfect if you want to be an attorney.
Yeah.
They're just going to sit and read case law and analyze it. So there's some people who come into law school with like a 10-year plan, and they know exactly what they want to do when they get out of law school. And, sometimes it's a simple plan. Like I knew one guy was like, I'm going to go work for my mom's law firm. They got a plan. Other people, and this was definitely me, had no idea what they wanted to do. A lot of people think that's a law degree, lawyer, but they also people go law degree, masters of library science, law librarian, law degree, academic career. Another pretty common thing for people who do become attorneys and say, oh, I don't want to be an attorney, is they go get a master's of library science and then become a law librarian. So there's plenty of things you can do with a JD.
It was becoming more apparent to Paul that law school wasn't the right place for him. As it turns out, being a harebrained, out-of-the-box creative thinker, that wasn't that great if you're someone who's trying to become a lawyer. Paul was beginning to crack underneath all of this pressure. Though there were parts of the experience that Paul absolutely loved and excelled at, there were other aspects that were just not easy for a free thinker, that were just not made for a punk.
I didn't really like reading case law. I did my best to understand it. I very rarely got the principle that they were going for. I probably didn't read enough either. I kept on trying to find ways to understand it. I kept on trying to find ways to study to make it stick. I just couldn't get what they needed me to remember. And there was this one difficult rule in contracts. I had to memorize it. If you asked me to recite it at the time I was working on it, it would have taken me about 12 minutes to go through the whole thing. And I just remember driving down this road from Durham to Raleigh, just reciting this rule over and over. And like I'd come to the end, go right back to the top and go through it again. And I got that one thing, but I had to do it for everything. And I couldn't possibly do it. I just couldn't make that much information stick. And I don't know if it's that it wasn't natural for me. I don't know if it's that it didn't make sense. I do remember I kind of have a reputation for harebrained thoughts because I'm not going to just think about this the way everyone thinks I should think about it.
You think outside the box, put simply.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually, and I don't want to make it sound like all attorneys are boring, uncreative people.
Really?
But to me, like at the time, everyone in law school thought I was an idiot for it. Thinking outside the box is really bad if you're an attorney, because what you're trying to do is come to the same conclusion a judge will, or at the very least, convince the judge that their logic aligns with your logic.
Not only is Paul certifiably a punk, and also certifiably a harebrained, out-of-the-box creative thinker, he's also incredibly tall. And I know, that shouldn't really matter, because in all honesty, Paul is a teddy bear. But there are people who take one look at him and think he's going to crush someone like a beer can.
I think because everyone always kind of framed me as this rough, hostile guy, I thought, yeah, I'm the rough, hostile guy. Yeah. Law school kind of showed me I'm not really that guy at all.
I can't imagine someone seeing you that way. I mean, did you feel like you were that kind of person?
I think I was taught from a young age to assume whatever criticisms people said about me were true. I once, when I was in Athens, walked into a bar. Didn't really even like bars. Still don't kind of like bars.
Mm-hmm.
But I walked into a bar, just looked around a room. A drunk guy walked up. I hadn't even said, not even like didn't say anything to him. Hadn't said anything to anyone yet. And he walked up and he goes, "I hate to get in a fight with you." I was like, okay.
Because you were looking for one for sure. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to go home and watch TV.
Sounds more like you. This would be frustrating to me if everyone assumed that I was, I don't know, a belly dancer, you know, like it's just such an absurd thing that you walk into a room and everyone just assumes you want to fight somebody, you know. How does that affect your mental health?
I think either it breaks you or you make your peace with it. Fortunately, in the latter category, I have made my peace with it. I feel like people develop those instincts for a good reason. I just try not to let it bother me. I used to be really bothered about my height. I used to be really upset about assumptions. People I still to this day don't really like watching basketball because I got so sick of people saying, "Oh, do you play basketball?" I just hate that question. I still have some days where someone will say, "I know who you are, and it's this," and I'll stew on it. And be like, "Are they right? Am I really that person?" Sarah has to talk me down, and a lot of my friends are aware that I get into those mindsets, and they've all gotten good at talking me out of it. And I've started to listen to that more than I've listened to people who want to define me for myself instead of letting me exist and then letting that define me with all my strengths and faults.
A dream or an aspiration is often an image that exists in our mind, or at least that's how it begins. It's a conception of our future, what can be, if only we play our cards right, if only all the right miracles happen. And we can see it, and we want it, and some of us chase after that dream. Paul, he visualized his dream. He wanted it, and he went after it. But for Paul, the dream and the reality ended up being two different things. The more he approached this dream, the more it turned into something else. The more he reached for what he wanted, the more he realized it was never ever going to be real. It was simply something he had seen on TV. So I guess this kind of circles back to, then why did you find it so interesting? What was the allure of it? What was the appeal?
I thought it was going to be like TV, and it so wasn't. You're not going to be Perry Mason solving the unsolvable case that nobody else can get. You're mostly going to be, doing kind of the same legal grunt work, trying to structure your argument, coming up with something strategic in a courtroom. Actually, can I tell you one of my favorite stories?
Yes.
From when I was in law school? Oh,
yes.
Man, I love this story. So I got an internship at the North Carolina Department of Justice, which was a great internship. A lot of really amazing, talented people working for way less than they could make if they were at a private firm. And I was a part of the torts division, which just meant people who were suing the state. And so I was working on this one lawsuit. The supervising attorney was pretty happy with my work. What happens in civil procedure is someone files a lawsuit, and then basically there's a certain amount of time where whoever the respondent in has a chance to rebut the charges or try and get the case dismissed.
Okay.
Before it ever sees the inside of a courtroom, before you even get to the part where you might learn something and settle it.
This is all pre-trial, this is Definitely. Like the settling out of court phase of a legal battle. Okay.
Well, and most lawsuits are settled out of court because
it's easier.
Well, it's not only is it easier, it's cheaper. So basically what happens is you get to a point where you talk to the opposing counsel. Y'all decide on a meeting to work out all the details of what you're going to do moving forward. I had sort of this Law and Order style meeting. I thought it was going to be something like that. And it's sort of like, I thought they'd hire scum like you to defend them. Well, I'm doing my duty for the people, that kind of exchange on TV. But here is almost verbatim what happened. The supervising attorney comes in. He says, "Hey, Paul, I was going to get on the phone with opposing counsel to schedule our first meeting. You want to be on the phone with me for that?" I was like, "Hell yeah." Get my popcorn. So I sat in his office. He called the other attorney, and the call kind of went like this. It was like, "Hey, Bill. Hey, Bob. How's it going?" "Good. Listen, so we've been over that case you filed, and we're going to go ahead with it." "Okay. So you want to do our first meeting?" "Yeah, we should probably get rolling on discovery." "Okay. How is Tuesday next week?" Tuesday is good. Wednesday? Yeah, I can do Wednesday. All right, cool. I'll talk to you then. All right, bye. That was it. And I even kind of said to him, I was like, that was the call? He goes, yeah. I was like, man, I told him, I was like, I thought it was going to be more like it was on TV. He goes, oh, like he was like, it hadn't even occurred to him that people might think that's what actual attorney work is like.
Yeah.
And he said, here's the deal with that. He goes, some lawyers will act like that with you, but most lawyers don't. He goes, that guy on the phone, he might need a job someday and I might be able to get him in here, or vice versa. Or maybe, you know, he's doing private practice. Somebody comes to me for legal advice and I can't do it. But I was like, but I know a guy. He goes, that's the thing. He goes, all of y'all are fighting. We're not fighting. You know, we've got a network. We've got to keep the legal field going. And the attorneys all realize that. And that's why it's such a high pressure, high paying job, because everyone who hires them is fighting for their life. When I was still an undergrad student, I took a class that was taught by an attorney. It was a music industry class because, like I said, I just wanted to major in being in a band. He was a licensed attorney who did music stuff, which is mostly just like contract work. And somebody said, so wait, could you defend me in a criminal case? He goes, yeah, I could. He goes, what would happen? He goes, you would probably go to jail and I would go home and sleep at night. You know, fast forward to when I'm in law school. One of the things he said is never show up to class unprepared. We'll ask you to leave. And somebody was unprepared once, and the professor kind of took a moment. He goes, okay, y'all, you can get away with this here, but in a courtroom, you cannot show up unprepared. Here, you're just going to have a bad day. Out there, someone's going to lose their home. Someone's going to go to prison. Someone's going to lose their business. This is just another day at the office for you. But to everyone else, it's literally a matter of life or death. Their life is going to change incontrovertibly if you show up unprepared. Don't ever do that again. In that moment, I was like, oh, shoot, that's a lot of weight. I don't know if I want to carry that much. You know, yeah, it'd be a nice paycheck, but I don't know if I want to carry that much weight around for that paycheck.
It's common for people to fail out of law school because they've experienced a major life event like having a child or caring for an ill family member. Some people drop out because of alcohol or substance abuse, some because they realize they can't manage their student loan debt. But for Paul, it was something more complicated, and it was slightly twofold. First of all, life as a law student is demanding, and every sign was saying the stakes will only rise. Paul should expect more stress, anxiety, and fatigue as time went on, all while he was already struggling to memorize everything he needed to memorize. And secondly, and more importantly, his dream of becoming a lawyer was turning into a nightmare. It was boring, demanding, exhausting, nothing like what he expected. It wasn't like TV. A lot of people fear dropping out of school. Paying off a student loan for a degree you don't have isn't the best way to enter into adulthood, but dropping out of law school isn't a one-way ticket to failure. Former President Theodore Roosevelt, broadcast journalist Diane Sawyer, and legendary football coach Vince Lombardi all dropped out of law school and went on to have very successful lives. It was when Paul failed his entrance exam for the second year of law school that he realized he had to quit. His dream of being a lawyer had become a guaranteed path to failure. So Paul had to put this dream to rest.
I missed the mark for my 2L year. I did the math once. And it was like less than 0.1 grade points to get to the next semester. And I did a little further math and realized that would be about 5 multiple choice questions on one test. Mm-hmm. That's it. Which you kind of feel like you did a really good job, but it also kind of kills you a little bit. It's really hard to even get that far. Even the most mediocre or even a bad attorney has done a lot of really hard work to get to be a really bad attorney. But I had 2 kind of really great moments happen for me after that. The first one was I found out about halfway through my internship that I wasn't going to be going back to law school. And so I had made a decision, and nobody forced this on me. In fact, they told me, like, you can stay if you want. But I went to my internship supervisor. I intentionally went out and bought like a pack of Wrigley's or something. And I also had like a little ID thing to get into the building. I walked into my supervisor's office. I put the gum and my ID thing down on his desk and said, "I'm here to hand in my badge and gum." He thought it was really, so my supervisor thought it was really funny. And, he'd seen work I'd done. He'd seen me come to work in a suit every day, which fucking killed me. I hated it. And he knew how much hard work I'd put in and that you only do that if you really want it. He'd seen me go through stacks of paper, no joke, like from the floor to about here. He'd seen me do all this work. He saw me trying. And then he kind of sat me down and he said, hey, you can stay if you want. I was like, I appreciate it. I think I'd enjoy it, but I think I need to move on to whatever's next in life. And he kind of just sat there. The attorneys are very careful with their words. If you ever ask an attorney any question, even it's what do you want to have for dinner tonight? They're probably going to say, depends. And he kind of stopped. I just remember him kind of stroking his chin, looking at me, looking off into the distance. And it was just kind of quiet for a minute. He goes, some people turn their back on their dreams and they're just not trying. Look, you've come this far. You've done a really incredible job. It's one thing when you turn your back on your dreams, but there's no need to chase your dreams when they turn their back on you. You don't need to keep chasing this unless it's what you absolutely want to do. And it was kind of in that moment, I was like, I don't want to do that. This is not what I want anymore.
So this is where I throw some hypotheticals at Paul. In some alternate universe, there is a Paul that stuck the course and completed law school. He did whatever he had to do to pursue that dream that came to him while watching documentaries on television. That dream of being a lawyer. But what did that dream cost him? What did he stand to gain by staying the course? And more importantly, what did he stand to lose? In some alternate universe, there is a Paul Keene who is a lawyer or an attorney. Can you even visualize what that looks like? Who is that Paul?
Yeah, let me tell you about Sideways Universe Paul. First of all, he's divorced. He's tried dating, but it doesn't work because he's so focused on himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any kids, and that kills him because that's something he's always wanted his whole life, but he doesn't have it.
Yeah.
He's probably not making much more money than he would if he'd have just done what he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I have one friend who she has her JD, but she was having trouble making ends meet. That's another reason to be glad that everything fell the way it did. I think as an attorney, since you're learning to talk other people into and talk other people out of certain things, you can talk yourself into and talk yourself out of things that just aren't true. Mm-hmm. Aside from talking myself into saying, yeah, there's nothing immoral about me having this gigantic house. There's nothing immoral about me making this much money. There's nothing immoral about this or that. I think I probably could have talked myself into, you're definitely happy. So what if Sarah left you? So what if you don't have any kids? You're happy, right?
A lot of people, when they're put in situations like this, the pressure of, well, I'm going to lose a lot if I don't stay on this course. What did you risk losing at this point?
I mean, so for starters, I'm still paying student loans for a degree I don't have. Sucks. I mean, that's money out of my pocket every month. I think there are probably some people who never talked about it with me, but lost respect for me, which I don't really care about now. But more than that, who gives a fuck? It's...
So you didn't really care what was at stake, because it seemed like there was more to lose if you stuck the course. You probably would have lost your relationship. You wouldn't be doing something that you love. So it seems like there was more at stake if you stayed.
I never really thought about it that way, but I think you're probably right.
Yes. And one bin was your wife, your future, making sure that you did something that you actually enjoyed. But then in the other bin was your pride. You made a decision, and it always kind of hurts to say, I guess I was wrong. I guess I fucked this up. I guess I failed. Because you made very conscious decision. You keep saying this over and over. I made myself accountable by telling everyone, this is my plan. This is what I'm going to do. That's what made it real for you. But at some point, you then had to go back and tell everyone, oh, by the way, I failed.
Because so you said in one bin, I have like my wife, my daughter, my free time, and then the other bin, I have my pride.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of things other people would put into that bin.
Like what?
Money, success, respect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, I got friends who are attorneys. They don't make a lot of money. So money's not in that bin.
Yeah.
Success, you can be a terrible attorney. There are probably people who, you can lose a bunch of cases and still keep your law license. So, you don't have to be successful. Respect, The people who give you that kind of respect, they don't respect you. They respect this title you've earned. And if they didn't respect you before you had it, they don't respect you after it. They respect the title you have. So really, when you take away all the other things, the only thing that's really in that bin is pride. The only thing that really keeps you hanging on when your dream has turned its back on you is this selfish insistence that you're not a failure and that you're going to prove everybody wrong.
Yeah, at some point you just have to let go. You can't keep clinging onto this thing that's dead. You keep fooling yourself like, no, I can make this work. It's gone.
I think there are some people who do throw that dead body on a slab and run a bolt of lightning through it. I think there are people who do cling to it long after they should have let go. That's one of the things I call one of the joys of failure. It's when the world doesn't end, you have to figure out how to keep on being alive. I had set myself up so intentionally. I'm going to be an attorney. It's going to happen. Nothing's going to get in my way. Oh, it didn't happen. Well, now what? You don't get to decide when the world ends. I had this mindset of, I don't become an attorney, I might as well be dead. But then I didn't become an attorney and I didn't die. But no, but it was also really beautiful, sort of like, because there's this kind of moment where you're like, like, you know, just kind of clenching up, not in the face. Yeah. And then you don't get hit in the face and you're like, oh, well, that wasn't so bad. And then everything else after that becomes less scary. And I still have a lot of fear of failure and I'm still working on that, but I'm willing to take bigger risks in life. There was one point where I was making backup plans for, well, what if Sarah and I can't afford a home at all? Mm-hmm. And I realized as I started planning, I was like, oh, if we were homeless, I could handle that. I could figure that out. It's not a big deal.
There's a whole lot less that scares you now.
Yeah. Like if being homeless doesn't really scare me that bad, what is going to scare me? You know, if you want to just take a brief side trip onto monetary loss, I only am paying for 1 year of law school. There are people who are paying for 3 years of law school and a bar exam. There are some people who are that deep and then they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I was always grateful I had that realization sooner rather than later.
Do you feel like that alternate universe, Paul, who is an attorney, do you feel like he would still identify as like a punk? Do you feel like he feels some sort of shame that he turned his back on that world, that identity?
Totally. There was one time I went to Punk Rock Bowling, which is this big 3 or 4 day festival in Las Vegas. They hold over Memorial Day weekend. And I remember I saw these guys who were wearing the t-shirts and the cargo shorts and skater shoes and spiked up their hair. But you could tell by the way their hair was cut, they would slick it back and they had business meetings back in LA. I think if I had any attachment to punk rock, it would have been like that. Just kind of quietly in my room.
Some stories about failure can also be stories about success. I know that sounds completely crazy, but stay with me here. If I learned anything while talking to Paul, it's that not all dreams we have are good dreams. Some of these dreams we shouldn't pursue. Some of them should just stay as some nebulous kind of yearning, because chasing after that dream can lead to some really dark, painful things. Or it can just be a complete waste of your time. But how do you know which is which? What dreams are the good dreams and what dreams are the bad dreams? Creative people, free thinkers, weirdos, punks, we all want to do something extraordinary with our lives, but what that something should be is a really difficult thing to tackle. But this is where a failure can become a success, because for a lot of us, it's the only way we can learn. A lot of us will never know what will lead us to failure until we've been led to failure. Sometimes failures help sharpen our discernment, and it's only until we've experienced those failures that we can move on with a better understanding of what dreams and what desires can bring us to success.
Take a moment, take stock of why you had that dream in the first place. That's the important part. Mm-hmm. You can get into a really dangerous spot where you're doing something for the wrong reasons, but there's nothing, immoral or problematic. Like, I wanted to be an attorney because I wanted to make sure I could always provide for my wife. Yeah. I mean, attorneys predate Jesus. They've been around for a while. I knew that profession wasn't going anywhere. That's a beautiful reason, but it was totally the wrong reason. If you're starting to realize a dream isn't going to happen, I'd say go back to the moment when you really committed yourself to that dream and said, well, what did you want? What did you hope you were going to get out of it? Because I bet once you start to dig in there, you'll start to find your motivations weren't nearly as pure as you thought they were.
Have you ever read the book, The Fountainhead?
No.
So,
but I will say it's not I don't really like anything I've read about Ayn Rand, but those books are just too fucking long.
Oh, I love them. But I read them when I was like a kid. I read like Atlas Shrugged. I read all of her stuff. In The Fountainhead, it's all about Howard Rourke, and Howard Rourke is just this unmovable force. And I was someone as a kid who I was constantly, people were gaslighting me. I was never sure of myself. I had no confidence. I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to be. But Howard Rourke knew exactly who he was. He knew right. He knew wrong. He never canvassed anybody. And he would defend to his death the placement of every nail in every board. In his mind, he was like, that is how it is done. That is what it needs to be. And that kind of like a surety, that kind of confidence, I craved so much. Mm-hmm. But finding that in a career, that's not what I found. I thought that's what I was going to get. I thought everyone was going to see me and my work and be like, wow, you are the next Frank Lloyd Wright. You are the next great. And when everyone's like, you're not that good. Yeah. And there were teachers who said it kindly, and there were teachers who did not say it so kindly. But I think being faced with the truth of this is not giving me what I wanted, I think was for me the reason why I had to walk away. Sometimes when we make a decision to go down a certain path, it's because we want something. But when we realize it's not giving us that thing, do we have the maturity to say, okay, I'm not getting what I want out of this. I need to go.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can't do that.
Well, it's funny too. So my mom, she actually taught at my high school, and she was they call it, it's the gifted program. They call it something different everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Where I grew up, it was called TAG. And my mom was in charge of the TAG department. One of the things she said about gifted students, she said, gifted kids are either very focused on one thing and that's the only thing they want to do, or they are so all over the board because they got so many talents, they could do almost anything they want. My friend Robert, he's one of the few people I know who does what he does for all the right reasons, in my opinion. He animates things. He does 3D animation. He has always wanted to be a filmmaker. Even to this day, it's funny. I'll talk to him. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm animating. Is that for work or for yourself? Doesn't matter to me anymore, because he does that for his job. But the reason that works is because his goal, even when we were kids, and, you know, he wanted to be a filmmaker and thought about doing TV shows and stuff. He never wanted to be rich. He never wanted to be famous. He always saw that as kind of a hassle. That's a pure motive. He didn't want to do it for this. You know, there was no tangential reason. He wanted to make film because he enjoyed the process of making film. He enjoyed having a film to look at. He liked making something, but also having made something. That's a pure motive.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, to bring it back to being a lawyer, if you're the type of person who likes reading dry documents and then writing dry documents, but having that brief moment of success where you saved someone's life or you got somebody that business that they always wanted, that's a pure motive. Do it for those reasons. Because, you know, there's no guarantee you're going to get respect. There's no guarantee you're going to get money. There's no guarantee you're going to have job security even. Find a pure motive, and then you'll make it. Then you'll find success. And the success that I found in IT came from, I like helping people. You know, a lot of IT people or a lot of support people get really mad at their customers. I almost never do, which is not because I'm some pure saint. I'm just sort of like, well, they got a problem. Let's, you know, why should they have an extra problem in their life? Let's have one less problem. Let's fix it. And I found success because it's a pure motive.
Finding the right motives, or the pure motives. Now, that's the hard part. What motivates someone to pursue the right things in life, to do the best possible job, to do what will ultimately have us enjoy success in life? What does that? There are a lot of things that motivate us. So how can we divide them by good and bad, pure and unpure? I don't really have a good answer for this one, but Paul and I do propose a theory. You have to read the signs. See, After you create your goals, tell people your goals, keep yourself accountable, and as you pursue your dreams, measure your progress. So think of it like this. Your dreams are like a garden. And if there's one plant in particular that's requiring so much of your attention that all your other plants are dying, you might want to kick that plant out of the garden. A bad dream is a dream that makes you lose sight of everything else that matters in life. The bad dream takes that all away, but a good dream can coexist with everything else. If you have pure motives, not every sign will be a warning sign. If you have pure motives, your garden is thriving.
My story of going to law school and failing out is more about not only just coping with that failure, but realizing that it's okay to fail, which is, I think, a very, very punk rock idea to just say, I did a bad job and I'm just going to move on. Who cares if I did a bad job? Who cares that this didn't work? I have heard stories of some people who failed out of law school, but kind of kept it a secret. Like there was one guy who I'm certain failed out, but he told everyone he just decided not to go back. And I was like, bullshit, that's not what you decided. After I failed out, I sent an email to friends and family saying I failed out. And the reason I did that is the phrase I kind of always attach to that is you can't throw away something you don't own. Man, I can see so many upsides never telling anyone this happened, or to making up some story like, oh no, I just decided it wasn't for me. But I said, no, I failed out. I didn't want to hide from it. And when I didn't hide from it, it became easier to move on to the next thing. In a weird way, I feel like whether we're talking about the punk rock teenager or the determined law school student or the guy who wanted to be a programmer, I think all those guys deep down would have understood where I am now. And, you know, a lot of those things are satisfied along the way. I still spend a lot of my time being like, I want to get a new punk rock t-shirt. I want to go to that show. I want to get new records. I'm still that guy in a lot of ways. The determined law school student, I think he'd be disappointed that he's not an attorney, but I think he would be gratified to know law school made him more disciplined. It made him more organized. It made him more focused. It made him able to plan things better. And he uses those skills everywhere he goes in life. Yeah. He probably makes more than some attorneys do. Just to say that his goal was money and he got that without even really trying as hard. I think I realized what my dream really was all the time was just to be a family man. I kind of don't even care what my job is day to day anymore. Even as a little kid, I always I want to have a wife and at least one kid, which is exactly what I have now. And it's weird to think back to the beginning of it and realize that was kind of the goal at the start. Yeah. And also to realize that if I'd become an attorney, I may have not had time to have been a family man. I don't look back on my life and be like, oh, all those horrible failures. It's like, oh, that's the path I took to get here. Yeah. And that part of the road wasn't paved very well. And then there was a huge traffic jam over there. But it's like, but now I'm here and I like here. You know, for me, he just had to go through that. A friend of mine who was an attorney was having a birthday dinner. He invited friends of his who were not attorneys. I remember sitting at the table and I think we were outnumbered by attorneys. They were all absorbed in shop talk. Yeah. And my favorite part is I looked over at my friend's girlfriend. She's just sitting there like head in hand, just this look of, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of hearing all this all the time. I don't fault those people for enjoying those moments. You should be that enthused about your job. You should be that excited to be an attorney. Mm-hmm. But I remember Sarah and I were walking back to our car. I think I said to her, I was like, man, thank God I'm not an attorney. And she goes, I was thinking the same thing. And it's really weird to have that moment of failure over time morph into, oh man, I so dodged a bullet there. I think success for me means looking around what I have and being happy with it. I think there's, I'd be lying if I said I never dreamed of some moderate level of fame or something like that. But I also think, when I take stock of what I've got right now, I like it a lot. I love living in Denver. I don't have a very big house, but a success is just looking around at what I have and saying, that's enough. I don't need any more than this. If you took 10-year-old or 12-year-old Paul and showed him the life that I have, he would be extremely disappointed. But that's because he was always wanting something bigger and better and trying to get people to notice him. I don't live that life anymore. I don't need a bigger house. I don't need a better car. But also, I don't need the respect of people who aren't going to respect me anyway. I don't need the prestige. The word prestige, the French root word, actually means illusion. So remember that next time someone says a prestigious university. So
maybe that's the takeaway from all of this is who cares? Who cares if you fail? Who cares if your reputation is tarnished? What matters is that you're happy with the life that you have. Other people's thoughts don't pay your bills. And if what you're doing to pay your bills makes you miserable, stop doing it. It sounds insanely simple, but if there's anything I learned from listening to Paul, it's exactly that. Don't be afraid to make the wrong decisions, but also don't be afraid to stop making the wrong decisions. I think we've all found ourselves in situations where we don't want to let go of something because of our pride or something else, even though it's just screwing us over. But there's nothing more punk than saying, this is keeping me from being free. This is keeping me from being happy. So, fuck it. This just isn't for me. I'd like to thank my friend Paul Keene for sharing his story, and also for providing some really great insight into failure, and for proving that failure can be a success. So once again, thank you for listening. My name is Jared, and this has been Subject. If you like what you heard, please subscribe.